heat hits him right in the chest at an extreme hot temperature to the point to where it knocks him all the way backwards and sets his shirt on fire. His literal shirt is on fire. So he tears his shirt off and stomps out the flames. He's worried about everything that's around him too, because in the area he's at, this could catch on fire from this very fire that's on his shirt. Half is gone. Disappeared instantaneously within seconds. So he looks at the rock where this thing was, and he notices that there's almost a perfect circle of where all the debris was pushed away in that exact spot. Welcome to Deceptive Reality. Welcome everybody to good old Deceptive Reality. As always, my name is Bert, and that is Nick over there. He's waving. He's got the Canadian wave going on.
The Queen's wave.
Oh, that's good stuff. You know, Nick, it's funny because I forget exactly when it was. It wasn't long after our podcast was actually up and moving. You brought to us a thing called the Shag Harbor incident, and you lied to us, Nick. You lied.
I lied. What are you talking about?
What
are you talking about, Willis?
You said it was one of the most documented UFO cases of all time. In fact, you may have said it was the most documented UFO case in Canadian history.
I stand by that. It's our Roswell.
Well, you would think that, but they're saying what I'm going to cover tonight is the actual Roswell.
We'll see. Proof, I'll be the judge of that.
With proof that is currently in a lot of different places.
Oh, okay. Well, you've caught my attention.
So I'm going to tell a little bit of story. I'm going to bring this in like a story form. It was the morning of May 20th of 1967. So it's not super far out, but it's a little bit of a distance. There's a man, and I'm probably going to butcher his name. I'm sorry to anyone, but Stefan Michalak. He left a motel near Falcon Lake, and he headed into the Whiteshell, and this is new to me. This is a Canadian thing, but it's the Whiteshell Provincial, and it's a park. Now, for all of us non-Canadians, what does that mean, Nick? What's a provincial park?
You have national parks and state parks.
Yes.
Well, instead of states, we have provinces. So a provincial park is our state park.
There we go. I didn't know what it was. I was like, what even is this? What kind of parks they got in Canada? But the Whiteshell Provincial Park. He had traveled about, now I'm going to give you a lot of stats, and I found this kind of interesting. And the reason I'm giving you some of these stats is we're going to go back in the story and look at some of the things where you're like, wait, what?
If this isn't Canada, it's got to be kilometers, right?
So it did it in the American version, which is miles. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Our Canadian audience is there, but the bulk of our viewers are in the good old US of A. So,
makes sense.
But he traveled about 90 miles east from his home in Winnipeg for the Victoria Day weekend.
It's for Queen Victoria. It was to celebrate her coronation.
Gotcha. Well, he was traveling, and he knew that was a 3-day weekend for him. So he traveled via a Greyhound bus, and he stayed at the Falcon Lake Motor Hotel. Whenever I see that, I think Motel, Hotel, Holiday Inn. Remember that old?
Oh,
that's what I think of. But basically what he wanted to do was he wanted to spend the holiday, and he wanted to search the exposed rocks that's it's near the Trans-Canadian Highway. Now, what's interesting about this guy is he wasn't just your normal Joe Schmo. And I think that's important in the story because he worked as an industrial mechanic. That's what he did for a living.
Okay. Well, at West, that's a lot of people in those kind of roles.
Well, it adds some credibility to our story because we're going to find a whole bunch of things where we're going to lean back and go, oh, so he's going to have an idea about this is how I'm going to put it. Because he's very descriptive. He gives us a lot of description things.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. But he would do a little bit of prospecting for fun. So I didn't know that there was a ton of prospecting there in Canada, but apparently where he's going, there's a lot. And it gave him a reason to kind of get outdoors. He liked being outdoors in the weather. He liked to explore and make a little bit of money on the side. which he had done before. So he'd been there before. He had found things in the past where he's like, oh, wait, I can go back and probably find some more stuff. So what he was looking for was quartz. Now, do you know why that is, Nick?
Okay. Why he wanted quartz?
Yes. He wanted to find quartz.
I'm assuming they sell it to people making watches and stuff, because otherwise I don't think it has a lot of use, does it?
That's what I thought. That is not the case.
Okay.
I actually learned something when I did researching of this.
Oh.
He had went the previous year and he kind of learned the general layout of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And he returned in 1967 on that long weekend. He kind of wanted to go a little bit further into the country. The reason he was looking for quartz was because a lot of times when you find quartz, there are other elements that's in the rock very near the quartz. So a lot of times you'll find silver and gold near quartz.
I had no idea about that.
I didn't either. I had no clue.
Thinking about all the places I found quartz when I was younger.
You need to go back.
Oh, I got to go back there now.
You got to go back now, Nick. So he was basically coming up with the idea of, you know what? It's a 3-day weekend. I'm going to go and I'm going to try to find some quartz. If I can find some quartz, maybe I can find some silver, maybe a little bit of gold. So apparently the year before he had found a little bit of that stuff. And he was like, well, shoot, let's try to make a little bit more money this time. Reaching the place, Stefan chose to basically go a ways out. He didn't want to be near the actual freeway, near the actual road. His son would later make the trip on horseback. And he said to go to the place where the story takes place, it's horseback riding about 35 to 40 minutes on a horse.
Ooh, that's quite a distance.
He left about 5:30 in the morning. And the only things he had with him was a hammer, a map, a compass, paper, pencil, and a little bit of food. That morning, he was wearing a little bit of a light jacket because it was a little bit breezy. And he also carried with him these tinted welding goggles, and he would use it because when he's chipping away at the rocks, he didn't want those particles to come up, hit his eye, and then blind him. Very smart. He's a smart man.
Yeah, he's done this once or twice before, I can tell.
When he got there, it was late morning. He found some quartz veins, and he found it kind of on a flat area where there's a lot of rock. And what he decided was, this is my spot. This is where I'm going to find all this stuff. So he kind of sits down, he has a light lunch, and he decides, I'm going to start kind of hammering into this rock. Well, when he got there, and you've talked about these geese before.
Jeez,
these geese can be a little aggressive. He said when he got there, he said they kind of gave what was known as like a mild protest.
Right.
And he said it was super duper loud. In fact, in the book that he wrote later, it wasn't even a book. It was like a handbook more so. But he would say that it was so loud that it brought all attention to him. And he called it uncanny cackles, what he called it.
Yeah, have you heard them before?
Not to the degree that he's talking about.
When they get near you and if they're angry, they can honk like in a very piercing way. It's real irritating.
Well, luckily, he was going through here. He finds a spot. They give him a hard time, and then they kind of settle down. They start chilling out a little bit. Apparently, they determined he's not going to leave regardless of what we do. We're just going to let it be. So he goes out there. He starts chipping away at these rocks, and he's trying to find his spot. He would chip a little bit and go, nah, this isn't quite it. Go down a little bit, chip a little bit more. All of a sudden, he starts noticing that these geese are starting to just fly up real quick, and they're making this very loud noise, almost like it scared them. They're taking off, and he's down there. He's kind of concentrating. He's got his goggles on, and he's chipping away at the rock. And he's like, what in the world? Like, there must be something coming into this area. And he happened to look up because he was looking at him flying away. And when he looked up, he noticed 2 glowing objects that were coming down through the sky.
Oh, boy.
Now, at first,
it's danger time.
It kind of is. At first, Stefan said the objects looked like what we would call conventional cigar-shaped objects. Each one had a hump or like a raised section at the top, and both gave off an intense, he said it, scarlet glow.
Okay.
So it was a very bright, glowing red. Now, as they got lower, he said that the outlines seemed to flatten into like an oval or like a disc shape. So it went from what we would call a cigar to what we would call the standard disc UFO.
I wonder if that has like any relation to like the heating pattern of them or something when they're starting to land, like their propulsion or whatever.
Could be. Could be. One disc stopped when it was coming down, and another one continued to go all the way down, and it would end up landing pretty much right in front of him and hovering right above a big massive rock. Now, he said this was about 150 feet away. So relatively close. For anyone that doesn't know, that would be about almost half a football field if you're looking at American football. Now, his own 1967 account, it talked about the color of the machine. So he said that it started out as a bright scarlet when he first saw it in the sky. He said once the craft landed, the red shifted towards a dark gray red and then a light gray. And then he said it almost cooled down to a hot stainless steel. He said a golden glow would still surround it even towards the end. Now, you've got some cooking stoves out there. I'm sure you've seen them get kind of red. They kind of hot when they, heating up a little bit.
Well, that's what I was thinking about with the color changing as they lowered.
And that's exactly what I was thinking too. And if you think about it, I guess one big question I would have is, why would a machine change like that? Obviously, the first thing I would go would be like some form of a temperature change. One possibility is obviously the heat, but it said that, metal, it can glow red when it reaches a certain high temperature. Now, he ended up talking about it being like a stainless steel kind of color at the end. I did look up to find out where stainless steel starts having some of those properties.
Okay.
And it's about, I think it was right over 700 degrees is where it starts to glow that color.
That's very hot.
That's hot. That's very hot.
Your ovens don't go that hot typically.
Right. Exactly. So he's looking at this and he's trying to figure out what it is. And he was very confused by the whole thing. Now, the interesting thing is he didn't think that it was a UFO.
Oh, he didn't?
He did not think it was a UFO.
What was he thinking?
Well, he was looking at it. And when he was looking at it, it was about 35 to 40 foot across is what he said. And it stood about 10 foot tall at the highest peak, that little raised part. He said that that was only about 10 feet high. The raised section he had noticed during the descent was almost like a capped off part. Like when we think conventional UFOs, a lot of times they don't have that little top part, but like in 60s and 70s UFOs, I think it was more predominant. And when I think it's cigar shaped, if you look at like military videos of nowadays, we talk about the Tic Tacs, how they're kind of like that oval. So I don't know. He needed kind of a moment to recover. So he's looking at this thing and he's like, what in the heck am I looking at? And the best thing he could think was around that time frame, the US and Canada was working on joint ventures of machinery that was similar to this.
Okay. I do remember seeing documentaries on that.
Yes. So he was thinking to himself, maybe this is something that is like government related, but he was confused on why one was hovering and the other one landed. Once the one landed and got kind of acclimated to the ground, the other one lifted right back up and then flew away within seconds.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. He said it was gone. But he's sitting there and he's watching this one that's on the rock. And he didn't know whether to approach it. He didn't know who owned this aircraft. And he was scared because of, who he was. Like, I'm in Canada, but he had a lot of things that we're going to go into here soon. But he had a very rough backstory, is how I'll put it. So he was a little bit hesitant about going closer. So he stood there and stared at that thing for roughly, according to his account, about 40 to 45 minutes.
I feel like I'd be the same.
I would be the same. I wouldn't rush up to it.
I definitely wouldn't run. Like a lot of people's instinct is to run, but if I thought that I was hidden,
Mm-hmm.
I'd watch it and just get a bearing on what this thing is before I approached it. But I probably would eventually approach it.
And that's exactly what he did. The question I've got for you, though, and I've been thinking about this, why do you think there was two and one just kind of hovered while the other one landed and then took off after it landed? Why do you think that would be?
The only thing I could think for that is, maybe they travel along in pairs, make sure one has a successful landing, then the other one escorts off to another destination. Maybe they always start in pairs, especially if they really did have a crash in Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a smart thing to do.
That would be pretty smart to do. I was thinking, if one was landing, what if one was having like a mechanical issue and the other one was making sure that it landed before it would take off?
That could very well be.
Yeah, I don't exactly know what it would be, but that was one of the first things that came to my mind. So he's sitting there and he's staring at whatever this device is, and he's super curious, some sort of an aircraft. But when he looked at it, he noticed a few different observations that was weird to him. One of which was he didn't see any wings. He didn't see any landing gear. There was no identifying marker. So, most aircrafts are going to have a U.S. flag on it, or it's going to have a Canadian maple leaf on it, or there's going to be some indicator of, hey, this is the origin of this product, whatever the product is. There was none of that stuff. Another thing that he noticed was even though it was glowing red when it was coming down, there was no exhaust system that he could recognize, which is uncommon. If it's a machine, there's got to be some form of an exhaust system. There has to be. So he's sitting there and he's staring at it. And now it's starting to get to the point to where he's starting to observe little things that you don't think of right away. He started noticing that he didn't see any rivets. That was very common in machinery back then. He also didn't notice any kind of obvious seams that was joining one panel to another.
Right.
Wow. Like technology on this really seems to be like doing really well. As he's sitting there, the object wasn't just like a dead piece of metal. He was looking at it and he noticed that around the bottom of the machine, because there was no legs that was holding it up, he was noticing little things that was almost like flying away.
Oh.
Almost like it was controlling the air around it.
Okay.
So it was like pushing debris away and all that kind of stuff. Little rocks was like flying from it. So it didn't land. It was just laying against the rock perfectly still, but it was like it was almost doing it on its own.
Reminds me of those, like we have those hovering flower pots or whatever like that, where it's two strong magnets keeping each other apart. Because they'll be perfectly still.
Which is interesting that you said that, because he said he heard whirling and a sound that he would consider like a motor. So again, that's why he's not thinking UFO. First off, UFOs was kind of a weird topic at that time frame anyway. But he heard motors, that's our stuff. It's not UFO stuff.
Right.
But he heard these motors working inside. And he also noticed that there was an odor that reminded him of sulfur and burned electrical wiring.
Oh, this does sound like there's a mechanical issue here.
Correct. Which is what he was mentioning. Now, those details, you got to remember his occupation. What did he do for a living?
He was the technical geologist or something like that, or I forget what exactly.
So his daytime job was an industrial mechanic. That's what he did for a living. So when he sees this, the first thing he thinks is, well, shoot, if this is a government thing and they're landing, they're having mechanical issues, maybe I can go help. So he slowly kind of starts making his way towards it. Now he's still a little hesitant. He's trying to figure out exactly what he's dealing with. It was very concerning to him because he doesn't even know, there's no identifying markers. What if it's not even his country?
Right.
Someone comes down, they have these mechanical issues. Clearly there's something going on. So he gets really, really close. And as he's going, he notices that on the side of the ship, there's almost like an opening that starts opening and a bright light that comes out of the machine right in front of him. So bright that he can't make out what's inside the ship.
That seems intentional.
Seems that way. So he gets up to the machine, and inside he was like, you know what, to be able to see in here, maybe I'll put my goggles down. So he puts his goggles down. He puts his hand on as he kind of starts to sift inside. And as he puts his hand, that's got those gloves, he's got the gloves where he's chipping. And there are those gloves like we would use for like cooking and stuff.
Right.
As he puts his hand against the machine, he noticed that they start feeling soft. So he pulls his hand away and it started melting those actual gloves.
Wow.
Now, do you know what temperature it takes to melt those gloves?
Not any temperature I have access to because I use those kind of gloves a lot.
Those gloves start getting soft at about 550 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow. That is much higher Celsius.
Yeah. So at this point, he noticed because his fingers, he could start feeling the heat on his fingers. He only left his hand there for just a very quick second. When he pulled his glove away, there was no markings from the glove. It had just softened the glove, but didn't stain on the actual exterior of the device. So he pulls his hand away. He puts his goggles, basically what you would use for welding, down. He looks inside, and when he looks inside, he doesn't see seats. He doesn't see controls. He doesn't see any kind of pilots. But what he notices is that it's almost like there's panels in there with a bunch of different lights, different colored lights that's almost going in like sequences. But in addition to that, he says he also sees very thick wires that are almost being ran strategically through the device.
Okay.
Then as he's sitting there and he's looking at this stuff, he notices something that sounds like two voices. And the way he described it is one was higher than the other, and it was muffled as if people were talking behind a wall. So now we got a little bit of a different situation. You know, I told you that he had a little bit of a tough past. Now, Stefan, he lived through World War II, and he survived a concentration camp before moving to Canada for his new life. So he had had a very rough patch. But in saying that, you got to understand, he went through World War II. He's in a concentration camp. There's probably not a whole lot that's going to scare Stefan.
No, he's seen the worst of humanity, so
his first thought was probably more practical than what mine and yours would be. He's like, obviously, this is a Canadian or American test vehicle that suffered a mechanical problem that went down in the wilderness. I have a job where this clearly happens. So he yells into the device, "Hey, you bunch of Yankees, you need help?" No answer. Stefan speaks multiple languages. So next he tries Russian. No answer. He then tries Polish. No answer. He tries his last result, which is the last thing he knew, which is German. Again, no answer. So now he's trying to figure out, the voices is kind of stopped. This bright light is still coming out of this machine. He's trying to figure it all out. As he's sitting there, he kind of starts to pull his hand back. And when he pulls his hand back, all of a sudden that door starts closing back up. And the thing that he noticed was that door didn't even make sense to be there because there was no hinges. There was no door lines. There was nothing.
Right. You mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
Now, something I want to ask you, because, you know, we talk about a lot of these things from time to time. If you ran into the same situation as him, would you feel safer if you heard what you thought was voices inside the machine, or would you feel more apprehensive?
That's a real tough one because, I mean, from the context of how we're talking about this and how we think now, I would probably say, oh, this is an alien ship. And if I heard alien voices, I'd be like, oh crap, I'm in trouble now. So I think I'd feel worse if I heard the voices.
Well, and here's the thing. He couldn't make out exactly what he thought they were saying.
Right. And that's even worse. That's a nightmare.
Even worse. That's
like
is.
Literally what happens in a nightmare. You hear muffled voices you can't make out. It's confusing. It's scary.
Yep. Well, it was definitely weird for him. He heard that, and then, of course, the doors close. And again, he's looking at this like an industrial engineer. He's like, how is this even possible? Like, there's no, like, this technology must be so extreme. There's no joints, no hinges, no bolts. He doesn't even see where anything could have been welded. So Stefan said that the best he could do is then, again, just kind of put his rubberized work glove against the machine because he wanted to see if there was still some heat and it was still radiating enough heat to where it was softening his glove. So he would pull it away again. And he said all of a sudden the craft started kind of rotating in place. It's just going back and forth. And as it turned, there was a rectangular grid that came around towards his chest. And Stefan said that inside this grid, there was rows of openings, and it looked exactly like an exhaust vent.
We've heard of this exact looking thing before.
Yes, we have.
Rendlesham Forest incident.
Yes.
I hope what happened there is not going to happen now.
So as he's sitting there and he sees this thing, all of a sudden, whoof, this heat hits him right in the chest.
Exact same thing.
At an extreme hot temperature to the point to where it knocks him all the way backwards and sets his shirt on fire.
Oh, wow.
His literal shirt is on fire. So he tears his shirt off and stomps out the flames. He's worried about everything that's around him too, because in the area he's at, this could catch on fire from this very fire that's on his shirt. So he's sitting here and he's stamping everything. Now, while he fought to keep the fire off of his body and off the ground, he starts to look back at where the craft is. Craft is gone.
Oh, it took off just like that.
Disappeared instantaneously within seconds. Now, a lot of people would obviously sit there and think, where did this craft go? But you got to remember, he was just knocked backwards, saw that he was on fire, ripped his shirt off. And in the time that all happened, the craft is gone. He's so confused by what's happening that he's looking around. He's trying to go, what is happening? What caused all this? So he looks at the rock where this thing was, and he notices that there's almost a perfect circle of where all the debris was pushed away in that exact spot. And he also estimated that the disturbance area was about 15 feet across, with material piles several inches deep near the edges. So it was pushing everything almost like a leaf blower to a degree.
Right. Like out like that kind of
exactly. Thing. Now, as he started looking at it and trying to figure it all out, he started getting a little sick.
Uh-oh. We know what that is too.
Yep. So he said all of a sudden his head started pounding. He started feeling nausea and he started vomiting on the spot.
Right.
And he was breaking down into like a cold sweats. I think we've all dealt with that. Like we kind of know when everything's going to happen because we can feel that cold sweat and then all of a sudden our stomach drops out and then we're lost. So he grabbed what he could. He left some of the equipment on the site. He pulled his jacket over his bare burned chest because he had already ripped everything pretty much off. And he tried to retrace his route towards the highway and he was just completely lost. He didn't know what was going on. He had a map and a compass, but because he was so sick, he was so confused. He wasn't even thinking about the compass or the map, either one. Like he was just in survival mode. He was in a state. Correct. So the Canadian Shield made it kind of difficult just in and of itself because, it's not a forgiving terrain. So he's sick, he's vomiting, he's dealing with this intense hair pressure. You got to remember, his son said on horseback, he went 35 to 40 minutes out. So this was a grandiose distance that he was trying to track back. Now, as he's working his way back, he misjudged the routing a little bit and he came onto the Trans-Canada Highway about a mile west of where he had entered the woods that very morning. Now, instead of, going to a hotel, now he had to kind of make his way back to try to find, some way of getting back to the hotel where he was staying. That was his first goal. Now, this is another thing that I didn't know anything about. This is obviously, I'm assuming, a Canadian thing. but there was a RCMP cruiser that stopped near him. Now, what is that?
So RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Okay.
If you ever see in pictures like the guy on horseback, they have the red jacket, those kind of things. That's our main police force.
Why was he in a cruiser then?
Well, they don't go around on horses much anymore, except for like shows and stuff like that.
That's no fun. They should be in horses all the time.
They wouldn't catch anyone, unfortunately. Because the rest of us aren't on horses most of the time. Most of the time.
Well, this is relatively important. So the guy's name is Constable G.A. Slotky.
Okay.
Now, he saw a man that he said had bloodshot eyes who appeared to be confused and irrational. At first glance, Stefan looked like someone who had maybe been drinking. But Slotsky recorded that he could smell no alcohol at the time that he came up to the guy. So there's two very different stories of the account. There's Stefan's story and there's the Constable GA. They kind of gave different accounts.
Oh, okay. This is interesting.
So Slotsky wrote that he offered to take Stefan for treatment, but Stefan declined. He wouldn't explain exactly what happened to him. Stefan had published that he remembered asking for medical help, and the officer left because he said he had other important deeds to attend to.
Oh, we got a very different story here then.
Correct. Stefan said that he told him that you might want to be careful. I feel like I might have radiation poisoning. A UFO just blasted me with something, and I've gotten deathly sick. And in his account, he said that this, what I would call like a police officer is what I would call him, or like a highway patrol for you guys, basically the same thing. He said he looked at him and said, I got too much stuff to do today. Almost like I'm not dealing whatever drunkenness this is. Now,
yeah, that is very possible. That is very possible.
But the important part is, at least to me, Stefan mentioned it, and there is a documented report that Stefan was found on the side of this highway.
Right.
And the important part for me is the RCMP. He said that he thought he was drunk and that he was some form of sick. He was willing to take to the hospital. So my thing is, he walked in this area completely fine at 5:30, comes back, and he's all kinds of messed up.
Right.
Now, I don't know much about a RCMP. Does that sound like something they would do, or are they a little bit more forgiving there?
Well, you get all kinds, and out west, that part of the highway is also called the Highway of Tears. So there's like some nasty stuff that the police were sort of involved in out there as well. But generally speaking, an RCMP officer would try to get help for someone. But if they were in an area that has a severe drinking problem, they might be like, just go home, get out of here, kind of thing. So it's hard to guess. But in general, RCMP are nice folks. So,
which makes sense. I think that could happen really anywhere, though. Yeah. I know that one of the things that I thought about is, if he was asking for help, and, from their standpoint, if he refused to help, why is that? Why would that be? And I think back to all the times when I've been like really sick. And I think in my mind, it's always, I've got one goal. Let me try to accomplish whatever that goal is. So if I was thinking I need to get back to this hotel, motel, whatever, that's my goal. And I'm not necessarily thinking straight because I'm so sick. My mind just doesn't allow it to happen. It's almost like your brain shuts down and goes into survival mode, kind of.
Yeah. I think another factor to think about is back then, you probably would not want to tell that story to someone, and you would not want to have to go to the hospital and explain why you've got these weird burn patterns on your chest, because you'll have no choice but to say that. Then they might lock you up on the 3rd floor, You might be ridiculed, like that was a risky situation to be in back then.
It was so weird. Well, anyway, Stefan, he finally makes it back to the motel and he calls his family in Winnipeg. And he doesn't really explain what's going on, but he's like, I'm cutting this visit short. I'll be home shortly. So he had arrived there via the Greyhound. So he had to wait for the bus to get there. He's still sitting there super nauseous. He's starting to look down at his chest and he's starting to notice that he's got burn marks in the shape of a grid on his chest, a perfect grid. But, it was kind of a weird thing for him. He didn't really know how to take it. He ends up getting into Winnipeg. His family picks him up. They bring him home. And I think it was his wife that picked him up. And he ends up being in his bedroom. And at that point, his son, I think, was 9 years old. His son goes into the room. He doesn't know exactly what's going on. He didn't notice the burns first on his dad. Do you know what he recognized first?
What?
The stench of burnt flesh when he entered the bedroom. So he said it was such a grotesque smell as a kid that was the first thing that he noticed, and he knew something was wrong.
Right.
And then obviously as he saw the burns on his dad, there was that association. So Stefan's wife, she was basically like, dude, you got to go to the doctor. Like, this is so bad. You're not good. Like, you're constantly throwing up. You're constantly sick. You're a mess. We got to take you. So they end up going to the hospital, and he wasn't going to say anything about flying saucers. He was just going to say, hey, I've got this sickness, but it becomes kind of a weird thing because he's so sick. It's like, do you tell the hospital? Because if you don't tell them, how do they treat you?
Well, that's a big thing. Like, what can they do? What's the point of even being there?
So he goes just to kind of hope they can do something for him. And what they determine is he does have these burns that's right in the grafting of his skin. And they can't quite figure it out. And they're like, we can't help you unless you know. So he was like, let's just say I may have went to an area that may have caused this, but because he was so vague, they just kind of let him go. They're like, hey, we're going to give you treatment for the burns, but if you're not going to come all the way out, there's nothing we can do. You're extremely sick. Hopefully you get over it. So he ends up going back home. And the more he thinks about it, he was like, I'm kind of scared that if I don't say something to somebody, another family could go back to that area and potentially get exactly what I got. Right. So his best idea is, I'm going to maybe reach out to the news to explain what happened. And I'm just going to have to be completely honest. Now, his wife, all she wanted was privacy. Within days, the newspaper ran a story under the headline, I was burned by UFO. So
no privacy now.
They come out, they look, and within just a few days, they kind of do him dirty by even putting that headline out there. And that's just wrong. Like, when you think about it, that's just wrong. That's a wrong way to do it. So with doing this, of course, it's a different day and age, but his son remembers they started getting phone calls from stranger asking whether the father was drunk, maybe he had mental issues.
Yeah. All the things that he probably would have refused hospital service from the police for earlier. This is all the stuff that happens to you.
100%. They basically started saying that he invented this flying machine. And, we talk about this guy earlier. He survived war. He was imprisoned in a concentration camp. Like, there's no real benefit to him doing any of this.
Right.
So he started writing down this sequence of events that happened, which ended up being a 40-page manuscript called My Encounter with UFO. It appeared in 1967. And it basically was his walk. And a lot of people goes, well, of course he wrote a book. He was trying to make money. He didn't make a single solitary dime off that book. In fact, he lost money on that little manuscript. And the whole reason he wrote it was he got tired of telling his story. People would walk up and be like, hey, you're the guy with the thing. Hey, tell me your story instead of doing it. He was writing these manuscripts printing them off, and then handing them to people and go, hey, just read this.
Yeah.
So everyone that says he was doing it for fame and fortune, that's not why he wrote that book.
Well, from his job title, he probably had a very well-paying job already that he may have risked or even lost, for all I know.
Yep.
So,
correct.
Not a smart move financially.
No. So obviously the story's out. The RCMP, they interviewed Stefan on May the 23rd and May the 24th. They recorded that at that point in time, he looked like he was still extremely sick.
Mm-hmm.
They also wanted him to take them back to the landing site so they could find, but the doctor that was working with him is like, he's way too sick to make that trip. Like he can't do it.
Right.
So Stefan drew a map from his memory and he sketched the area from above. And he was basically like, hey, if you do this, and then he even made a side view where it's like, hey, if you look at this elevation, there's these marked magnetic areas, you'll be able to find them. It should be super easy. And it was so practical because he was a mechanic. And on top of that, he prospected, for fun. It was easy for him to draw these maps. So it'd be very hard for them to not be able to follow a map. So they end up taking this map out. They don't find the exact site that he was talking about, but they find some of his stuff out there.
Okay.
Now, his stuff wasn't very far from the site. So Stefan, they go back to him. They're like, hey, we found some of your stuff, some of the discarded clothing, the equipment that was still there. Hey, but the site that you said was there wasn't really there. And he's like, I'm telling you, it was there. You'll be able to see it. I saw the spot in the ground where it was. It was clearly there. There's no way that you can tell me that it was not. So they basically was like, well, we think he's lying. They didn't tell him. So one of them's like, you know what? Because they thought he was drunk. The initial report was that he might have been drinking, but they didn't smell alcohol. And the problem was, when he did the interview with him, he said that he had not been drinking. But when they went to the motel where he was, they said that they knew for sure that he had had 2 beers that day.
Okay.
So there was a confliction in the story between what he had told the police and what the motel had said.
Yeah, it's like 2 conflicting testimonies right now so far.
Exactly.
So that doesn't help the situation.
So they end up concocting this idea. They're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take him out. We're going to see if we can soften him up with a little bit of liquor. And if he says he doesn't drink, let's just see if he drinks. So they go out and they're like, hey, let's talk about this event. And hey, do you want a beer? And he goes, no, I don't want a beer. I'm not drinking. Stands tall. And then a little bit later, as they're talking, they're like, hey, you maybe want a shot? And he ends up drinking 2 shots on the scene. So their observation is he's a liar. He was drinking. The hotel said he was drinking. He drinks now. He was clearly drunk. He invented this entire thing. Then they came up with the idea that they thought that maybe he used a grill to burn those spots into his own chest.
Oh, geez.
So Stefan's annoyed. Well, Stefan couldn't, he couldn't do any better than giving him a map. So he's annoyed by the entire thing. So he's like, screw it. I'm going to go back to the spot that I know was there. And he's still sick. He lost, I think it was 50 pounds in a very short time frame. So he ends up going out there and guess what he finds?
The circle?
The exact spot where it all happened. They end up bringing the crews out. When they bring the crews out, the radiation in that area is so high, they end up finding radium-226.
Okay.
And the officials that then went out to test where he said that the levels was so high, it posed a public hazard. Now,
that doesn't bode well for him.
So they debate on shutting that part of the park down because they're like, no one should be in this area at all. Now, what's interesting is this is in the same exact spot where he said this UFO was.
Right.
Now, for anyone that doesn't know, radium-226 it's basically the decay of uranium. That's how that happens. There's no simplistic way of that occurring. That's just literally what's there. Now, there is some regions that in those, whenever you're dealing with like quartz and stuff like that, you will find some trace amounts of radium-226. That's not uncommon. But this was such a high level that if you look in the Canadian sites, you will see that they had started the process of shutting that part of the park down. Hence why I say this is one of the most documented things ever. So there was a lot of confusion with it. The case became even stranger again in 1968 when Stefan and an associate found silver-colored pieces and cracks near the accepted site. Tests found that the silver was also radioactive material that was attached to the silver. One surviving piece was bent into a W shape. The discovery added a physical object to the actual file of what occurred there. So they're basically building this entire case. Now, obviously, I think it goes without saying, radiation doesn't prove that it's a UFO. Contaminated materials is not UFO. The other thing they found was that all of his materials that day was also radioactive, including the clothing that he was wearing. Mm-hmm. And the weird thing is the burns that was on his body, they stayed there from the day that happened until the day that he died, but they would heal up and then they would come back in the same exact spots over and over again. And it was always in the shape of the grid. And they found that it would heal and then come back exactly every 112 days.
112. That's interesting.
Every 112 days. Now, they believe that there's a reason for that.
What is that?
So I didn't know until I did a little bit of research. What happens is if you have an acute radiation directed particle, especially when you get into like gamma rays or X-rays, if it's at such a high level, what they determined was to make those marks inside of his skin. They believe that if you was to look at it on a Geiger counter, it would be to the point to where it would kill someone, but because it was just a matter of seconds, it wasn't quite enough time to kill him. But what happens is when that radiation hits in those patches, not only does it kill the skin, but it kills the DNA referencing. So when the skin would go to repair itself, because there's damage specifically to that DNA, it would never allow itself to be fully healed. So it would heal partially and then unheal because that DNA strand was missing that information.
That's super interesting. That's very interesting.
Now, what the official report said is they believe that he was going back and reburning himself every 112 days to keep the story alive.
Right. I think they'd be able to tell that very easy if that was the case.
Very much so. The interesting, from my perspective, is that for the years that followed, not only did he not make money on the manuscript, he was handing it out to people to not have to retell the story, but he was also paying for all of his medical bills in Canada and the US to try to cure whatever this was.
Oh, wow.
And he dealt with that until the day he died. And I think he died when he was like 83. So he did live to be 83.
He got real lucky with that kind of radiation, because I would have expected like serious cancer from that.
Exactly. But again, probably one of the highest, most documented cases in Canada. The actual undershirt that he was wearing with the exact burn holes in the exact same spot as his skin, if you would have put it over top, you would see those burn holes directly, is currently sitting in a spot there in Canada. I think it's at a college. And you can actually see that undershirt. They've kept it as a souvenir of sorts. And in fact, Canada created a coin after he died to commemorate the event. And it was a silver coin that glows in the dark.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
I'll have to look that up.
Yep. It was a commemorative coin that glows in the dark. Now, it was the Royal Canadian Mint. It was a silver commemorative coin.
I see it here. Yeah, I see it.
So they took so much pride in it.
$20 coin.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they denied it all the way until he died. Now, he never recanted his story. He never changed his story. He dealt with that illness the rest of his life to where it was coming back every 112 days. So the skeptics say that obviously he was the one that was burning himself. He's trying to get the attention, but everything else around him says quite the opposite. He created a pamphlet so he didn't have to talk to people about it. He paid for the pamphlets, handed them out for free. He never did any kind of shows to make money. And on top of all of that, he was paying for all of his own medical bills for an event that doesn't make sense. Why would you burn yourself and then constantly pay medical bills in 2 different countries to try to cure whatever it is?
Yeah, there's a lot easier ways to try to make yourself seem legit than that.
Correct.
Cheaper ways too.
Now, with the entire story that I told you, what do you lean towards? Do you think that maybe this was some sort of a military prototype or an unknown craft? Do you think that maybe it was a true UFO story? What do you think? What's going through your brain?
I think it is a true UFO story, and I think that they learned lessons from their previous incidents. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the behavior from this, like we saw repeated behavior, like the exhaust was from Rendlesham Forest, traveling in pairs when they have mechanical failures. Exact same thing, if you remember, happened in the Shag Harbor incident.
That's true.
So
I think
know. UFO.
There's something to it. I find the story very interesting. I'm curious what all of you think at home. Do you think this could possibly be a UFO story? Did we find the most documented Canadian UFO story? That's the next thing I want to know. Nick told us, maybe 2 years ago? He was like, the Shag Harbor was by far the biggest. You think this one can line up, or do you think this one not as good as Shag Harbor?
I think this one's maybe more interesting in some ways, but I would still stand by that Shag Harbor's more documented, because the police actually wrote the report that it was a UFO into the official files for the Shag Harbor incident. Plus there was like 50 or 60 witnesses and physical evidence that they collected from the site of the crash. So I'm going to stick with that.
Well, that's one thing to remember. For those of you that might be curious about what we're talking about for another Canadian mystery with an official paper trail, you're going to want to check out our other episode that's on the Shag Harbor. It's towards the beginning of when we started doing podcasting, actually. So it's going to look a little bit different, might sound a little bit different than what you're accustomed to, but I'm curious to know in the comments down below, what do you think? Also, I ask you this every single week. If you give us a thumbs up wherever you listen to the podcast, definitely appreciate it. That's how we continue to grow. It might seem like such a simple thing that might not mean a whole lot, but that 1 second that you click that like button helps YouTube push us to other people, that helps see our videos. But I appreciate each and every one of you. I can't wait until I see you then. Until we see you, goodbye.
Goodbye.